A man charged with hijacking a small plane in Victoria last week is set to appear in court tomorrow, but in the meantime, there are some questions about the incident, including why the fighter jets that raced to respond were from the U.S., not Canada. Here's what NORAD's Director of Operations told CBC about that decision.
The Canadian NORAD region is handling this, and the continental United States NORAD region is also prepared to handle this. We take a look at the distances and times involved, and we assessed here at the headquarters and throughout that the closest the closest fighters to be able to respond and have the most amount of gas when they got there to be able to spend time, and the closest tanker that would be able to service them was the fighters that we sent, the F-15s that we sent. So that's the reason that we launched the F-15s. We also went to CANAR, the Canadian NORAD region, and CANAR started the process to get the F-18s in case it's an enduring mission. As it turned out, the thing itself resolved before the Hornets got airborne.
Our next guest says Canada would be able to respond itself if it had better defence capabilities. Christian Leuprecht is a professor at the Royal Military College of Canada and Queen's University and the editor-in-chief of the Canadian Military Journal, and he joins us from Kingston. Christian, we know the Americans responded under the command of NORAD. Does that surprise you at all?
No, so the division of labor is that whoever is closer, those are the assets that are going to respond. Now, of course, the Americans have more assets and the Americans have more bases. And in particular, when it comes to British Columbia, you can see that U.S. assets are usually closer than Canadian assets because the closest Canadian base is Cold Lake. So it's a significant distance from the British Columbia coast. So it's not entirely surprising that U.S. assets would have been there. The U.S. also tends to have more aircraft in the air at any given time. So rather than having to scramble jets, it has jets in the air that can respond.
You're an expert on a lot of things, including Canada's military, and you're also a thoughtful analyst. And I think wearing that second hat, the analyst hat, I want to ask you a couple of sort of philosophical questions. How should Canadians feel about the fact that the third biggest city in the country, Vancouver, when it's facing a potential threat, in this case it was a private plane that really wasn't a threat, but for a while it looked like a potential threat. How should Canadians feel about having to rely on U.S. fighter jets in a situation like that?
So NORAD's been around since 1958. This is an arrangement we have where we defend the continent together with the United States. And so it shows the trust and the confidence we can have in that relationship with the United States. At the same time, of course, there is long-standing complaints from various U.S. administrations, including the current one, about Canada's underinvestments and deficits when it comes to defense. And you might argue that had Canada invested more proactively rather than making politics out of the F-35 purchase and actually follow through with that purchase, we would have jets that would be more capable to respond, because currently we're responding effectively with 40-year-old technology. Yes, that has been upgraded, but certainly I think Canadians are asking the right questions in this case, and these are also the questions, of course, that the Trump administration is asking. So
we are talking in this country about massive increases in defense spending, at least up to 2%, perhaps up to 5% of GDP in a few years. This is what appears to be Prime Minister Carney's goal. Do we know if even that big number, the 5% of GDP, do you think that's going to make a significant difference in our number of aircraft we have available and their readiness?
Well, the bulk of the investments so far that the government had already made, the previous government, have gone into continental defense. And so I think we will see improved capabilities for continental defense, which is ultimately job one for any country, including Canada, especially given the arrangements we have with the United States to defend the continent together. And it suggests that we need to continue to invest in sustainable commitments, because we also can't always count on the Americans to respond. Their assets also are scarce and their assets are in high demand. So we need to be in a position where we are able to look after our own sovereignty, should that come to pass, that we don't have American assets to rely on. And we're already feeling that when it comes to response to wildfires, for instance, and evacuations. And so we need to persist in the investments that we're making in recapitalizing the Canadian Armed Forces.
One final question, Christian, and again, I think this is more on the philosophical, analytical side than the factual side, but I think it's interesting, and I'm looking for your perspective on this, at a time when Canadians have their elbows up, at a time when Trump is making us question the long-standing ties between these two countries. It looks like if there's one thing that remains intact and we can rely on, it's NORAD, this joint command to protect. What's your view of that?
Well, certainly, I think it reaffirms that we have no other option when it comes to continental defense to continue to work closely with the United States. And I've long argued that a more aggressive investment in defense capabilities in this country would reduce some of the concerns and some of the complaints from the United States and would have put us in a much more favorable position to negotiate the trade concerns that the U.S. administration has raised. So ultimately, these are political decisions and political questions about how much political capital, reputation, and financial risk a Canadian government is willing to take when it comes to investing and making sure we are able to commit to the defense capabilities that we committed to in 1958 to ensure that we are a reliable partner with the United States in defending this continent.
It is a big issue, and it's an important issue. And Christian, thank you very much for discussing it with us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you, Ian.
Christian Leuprecht is a professor at the Royal Military College and Queen's University and the editor-in-chief of the Canadian Military Journal.